before and after was we had a 46% lift in attendance to the webinars, and then we had a 45% lift in attendance from target accounts. And so just in that by itself, adjusting how you even put the tactic in market and how you hone that focus, we're able to see significant change in the audience that actually shows up for that tactic.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Generating demand for new products is super challenging, but the challenges would be at a different level if you had to generate the demand for product categories that didn't exist and if you had to go through procurement. Luckily, today's technologies allow you to target specific roles in a given account so they can relate with your logo and brand before you visit them. The manufacturers who would have wasted millions of dollars in the generic marketing strategies such as trade shows without any tracking can know what is happening with each of the impressions, who's looking at your content, and if you are heading in the right direction with your investments. In today's episode, our guest, Daniel Englebretson, shares his insights into the demand generation strategies for new product development. He also shares several stories about his work where he successfully penetrated the market where there was not even a category for that product. Finally, he shares his challenges working with procurement and how he broke into these accounts through innovative targeting strategies that are only possible through the technologies available in the market. Let me introduce Daniel to you. Daniel is the founder at Kronos, a global marketing consultancy focused on B2B marketing with a background in driving demand for lean Fortune 500 manufacturers and high-tech startups. Daniel has launched ABM programs across a variety of enterprise and hyper-growth companies. This experience has shaped his perspective that time is the marketer's most valuable resource, and you will often find Daniel sharing strategies to maximize return on effort. He holds an MBA from Elon University and has studied marketing, analytics, and economics. In his free time, Daniel is a soccer coach for his 5 and 7-year-old kids and a motorsports hobbyist. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Sam.
Of course, and I am super excited to have you as well because one of the challenging problems that most manufacturers are going to face is going to be the new product introduction, especially if they don't know how to approach their target market for this. Just to kick things off, do you want to start with your personal story and current focus, Daniel?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So I am a traditional marketer, if you will. I went to undergrad for marketing and economics. And when I came out of undergrad, I worked for a test and measurement company, a pretty large distributor. They were very focused on ISO 17025. So I went into a lot of manufacturers and dealt with a lot of quality systems. And my job was to help generate demand for services mostly, but also calibration services and things like that for quality, but also product sales. And so that was kind of where I cut my teeth in marketing, working for the CEO and helping them build their first real digital presence and kind of turning on demand generation as a function. So I did that for a few years and learned a lot about lean and quality and manufacturing from that. And I got recruited out by a really large global manufacturer who was trying to also kind of bring digital demand gen, to bear for their business. So I moved on to that role, and it was in a very lean environment. Everything was very focused on daily management and QDIP and very lean. And every dollar was very tightly watched. And the focus was very much on incremental revenue. Like, how could we engage a very mature market and drive incremental revenue? And from a new product perspective, I recall we launched a couple of products in the time that I was there, and my focus was on creating demand for those new products and solutions. So I did that for a little while, a few years, and from there I went to the largest lighting manufacturer in the world. And what I learned there was basically everybody buys lights, so it's a very broad market.
I know.
And I worked on a team of about 100 marketers,
Oh,
and
wow.
I ran the shared services team. So I had creative services and the web team, the market automation team, and all that. And that's where I really learned about scale, and it was all about kind of building repeatable process to scale that up. So I learned a lot there, and then I dovetailed from that and took almost a 180 into VC-backed startup. And I went to work for a manufacturer out of Durham, North Carolina, that had, at this point, they've raised about $300 million, and they were bringing a totally new type of technology to market, and they were a new company. And my job was to basically be the demand generation function for them. So I got to apply some of the lean methodology and some of that lessons of scale, and then pull that into a startup, which was really interesting. So that's what I did for the first 10-ish, a little more than 10 years of my career. And then about 2 years ago, I took all of that learning and packaged it up into a product and started up an agency. And that's what I do today, helping people build and scale demand gen for their businesses.
Amazing, man. And I have to tell you this, I am a big fan of marketers who can really speak their industry. And this is also my challenge with a lot of marketers. When I talk to them, they talk a lot of marketing, but very little product and the industry. That's what I appreciate about you. And this is going to be a so fascinating conversation overall in digging into, marketing for manufacturers, especially when it comes to new product introduction. So we have one of these standard questions. We are going to dig into all of your stories, and I know you have tons and tons of exciting ones. So before we do that, we have one of these standard questions for all of our guests, and that is going to be, Daniel, your perspective on business growth.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's also, I feel like, an ever evolving one. I think, I spent some time reflecting on this a lot over the years, and I think the defining characteristic for me has been that as a marketer, no matter where you are, no matter what your budgets are, time is your most valuable resource. And being able to get to market quickly, being able to learn quickly, being able to generate results or data quickly, not wasting your time on the wrong stuff or building the wrong content or running the wrong campaign, or if you did, figuring it out very quickly and moving to the right thing is there. It's kind of a defining characteristic of how I think. I've worked in worlds where I had like no budget, and I worked in worlds where I had millions of dollars of budget. And budget is where you usually go as a demand gen marketer, but it's really not the most limiting thing. It is your time. So if I'm thinking about growth, a lot of what I have tried to bring to bear for myself and for others is, how can you get a productive effort up and running quickly so that you can iterate, learn, and iterate for success. And so for me, when I'm thinking about driving growth and driving demand for businesses, I'm trying to do it holistically, but also I think of it as the minimum viable productive campaign. How do I get that up and running so that I can learn and grow on top of actual data? So that's definitely how I think about it.
Yeah, and honestly speaking, when I look at the demand gen, or especially for the new product introductions, it's really the rocket science, to be honest, because nobody really has any answers to it, and not many people are really good at it. Okay, so obviously, we want to understand the process, how to basically scale the demand gen for a product, especially that are going to be new. So describe the process of the demand gen using the story. What was the beginning? Describe the business model. Give me all the details so that we can understand, how to basically go through the process of demand gen.
Absolutely. One of the reasons why I suggested NPI, or new product introduction, is because basically all manufacturers are making something. They have to bring something to market. There's always this new product introduction, or at least new product development going on. And part of the reason why I like to start there is
Yeah.
because I think one of the biggest gaps that sometimes you find with marketers is they don't start all the way back at NPI. And what I mean by that is when you're doing that voice of customer research, when you're understanding the problems that are in the market, and
Yeah.
you're trying to develop products that people actually want to buy, and you're doing that initial upfront thinking, that is really where your demand gen starts because you're trying to latch on to this work you're already doing, your product management team's already doing to understand what are the features that I need, what are the pain points in the market, who does care about these things. And as you're doing that work on the front end to develop that product, it starts to really shape up what becomes the foundations of your demand generation of understanding, well, who should I be talking to and what should I be saying to them and where should I be doing that to try to generate that demand. And so in the case of this category creation
Yeah.
story, we had a product. It was a laser transceiver package that
Yeah.
goes into optical communications equipment where we had created basically a new never before seen product that just didn't exist. So if you Googled the name of this technology application, you would not find anything because it did
Yeah.
not exist. And aside from that, if somebody was to read the name of this product, they wouldn't really understand what it was.
Yeah.
And so the circumstance was that we knew who had the problems that this product solved, and
Yeah.
we knew where they worked, but they didn't know anything about what this product was, how it worked, or why they would need it.
Yeah.
And so, as we wanted to build the demand gen for that, we spent a lot of time discovering who are these accounts, who are these personas, what do they care about, and building that understanding, and then using the account-based approach we focused our advertising and our emailing and our outbound efforts entirely on that audience, at those accounts. And so that's kind of one of the core tenets, if you will, of the account-based approach is honing your focus to be very specifically on the people at the accounts that you're trying to engage with. So that's kind of where the story starts.
So here, let's say if we talk about this whole campaign, so you mentioned about, let's say, the product manager. Now, if I look at my SMB manufacturers, they might not even have a role called product manager, or they might not even understand what voice of customer means. So maybe you want to go back a little bit and describe to us when you had this problem of you had the product, but people could not really relate with the product because they had never seen this before. So how was the research process? How did they come up with the product? Was this related to the problem? And how did you identify the target market? Because in so far you have already said that the accounts were already identified, but describe the process a little bit more there.
Yeah. So voice of customer, talking to your customers and understanding the problems that they're having. And, even if you don't have a product manager on staff, you have somebody who's talking to your customers and you're hearing from your customers what their problems are.
Yeah.
And as you're learning those problems, you are likely adjusting what your product is or the features that it has in order to better solve those problems, or at least that's a common approach. And so one thing that's interesting to kind of explore here where the rubber meets the road with demand gen, and
Yeah.
particularly with the account-based approach, is you might think that the audience cares about BOM costs, bill of material costs, and then that's their most critical thing, versus in this case, like temperature stability, which is really critical product feature for how the product works.
Yeah.
And you're not sure which one actually resonates the most. Well, one of the things that we are commonly doing with the account-based approach is if you could say one thing to this audience and another thing to that audience, and then test the difference between how they perform.
Yeah.
So it's very, like in this case, particularly able to run more than one message or more than one value prop around things like bill of material cost versus things like temperature stability. And based on how people are engaging with that messaging, you can hone in on, oh, well, people really care about this and they don't care about that. So that's two really specific examples. But you can imagine where you're going through your voice of customer research and you're hearing about these different problems. If you had a way to test which problems people care about the most in your messaging, and then roll that back into how you talk about your product or even how you develop your product, that is where it gets really interesting with the account-based approach, because you can dial that targeting all the way in to specific people at specific accounts and learn that. And so in the case of this program, some of the things that we have been doing traditionally, we were doing like basically broad educational webinar. We're targeting R&D engineers and just engineering types because these are people who are designing products and they're looking for a part to go into the product.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty common to run webinars, or we also ran a lot of trade pub advertising, like relevant trade pubs in the space. I'm sure you guys have run into these before.
Yeah.
You take out some ads on their website, or maybe you get in their newsletter and you just push, product information to that audience.
Yeah.
So traditionally we had run a lot of webinars through those kinds of channels.
Yeah.
And when we flipped to the account-based approach, one of the biggest things we did is we paid attention to what accounts would we want to attend this webinar.
Yeah.
And then we focused our advertising and our outbound on inviting those accounts to the webinar. And it seems like a pretty obvious thing to do, but versus a broad outreach through like a trade pub where you're not totally sure who's going to see these ads or who might click on register now, versus an approach where you're only targeting these, in this case, I think it was like 96 accounts. We were targeting these 96 accounts only. What would you find? And what we found in that case, before and after, was we had a 46% lift in attendance to the webinars, and then we had a 45% lift in attendance from target accounts. And so just in that by itself, adjusting how you even put the tactic in market and how you hone that focus, we're able to see significant change in the audience that actually shows up for that tactic. And so that's where we start to see some of that early learning around who cares and what they care about and how to get them in to start folding that back into what we're doing.
Okay, very interesting. So when you look at these 96 accounts, right? So obviously, when you are doing all of this research, when you are, let's say, publishing your product in those magazines or in the advertisements, there you are going to have initial hypothesis that, okay, I am targeting any sort of micro industry, and these are probably going to be the accounts that are probably going to care for my product, right? Did you have any sort of surprises in that? When you ran this, were there like, okay, you wanted to go after hospitals, but then, on the webinar, all of a sudden, somebody else started showing up, and then you found some other market from there, completely different accounts. So did you have any sort of surprises or learning when you were going through the process of hypothesis and testing?
Yeah, that's a great question. In this particular product, just to keep it to this story, it was pretty dialed in because we knew who was going to have these problems.
So describe which industry are we talking about? So describe the industry persona of those 90 customers so that we can relate a little bit.
Yeah, so telecom equipment manufacturers. Basically, if you think about fiber optic communications, like fiber to your home, or even data center communications, the boxes that the fiber optic cables plug into, the people who make those boxes, or who we were targeting, and those transceivers that go on the end of the cables that are shooting the lasers out and receiving the lasers back for optical communications, our parts went into those things. And so we were targeting primarily R&D engineers and product engineers, because in the space of fiber optic communications, as I'm sure you've experienced in your own personal life, speeds are ever increasing, and it's very competitive how fast you can shoot data down the pipe. And so that space is just constantly innovating and evolving, trying to stay ahead of how much data can you get down this one cable. And the product that we made had a direct impact on your ability to get more data down that cable, basically, and to do it more cost effectively as well. So that was kind of the use case. And so finding people who make laser transceivers is not hardest task in the world. A place that we did, one of the things we used to do to try to dig those up this isn't rocket science, but we would follow trade shows and watch who was exhibiting at the trade shows, and we would look for new entrants into the market, who were showing up for like Crunchbase and stuff like that. But the other common way is by using the job titles. We would look for businesses that employed people who had these job titles.
Yeah.
And so kind of cross-referencing the two in that case. A slightly better use case for this particular question is same company, different product line. We were making a freezer, a countertop freezer that was probably about the size of your glove box.
Yeah.
And that we were marketing it to, well, anybody that we could. But the original idea was basically check out at the convenience store, and instead of having a Snickers bar, you'd have a frozen Snickers bar. That was basically the use case.
Yeah.
And so wherever you might would have impulse purchases, of candy or something like that, an ice cream manufacturer might really like to have ice cream there instead. And we could do that with the product that we had because it's very compact, not like a traditional freezer. So in that case, with that product we were bringing to market, we didn't actually know. It was originally spec'd for a specific ice cream manufacturer who had a very specific use case, and then we brought it to market trying to find other people who would value it. And in that case, we tried lots of verticals. We tried grocery, we tried arenas, we tried Major League Sports, we tried anybody that you could think of, casinos that might sell an ice cream bar, or something like that, or frozen alcohol or whatever it was. And so what we did in that scenario is we basically went industry by industry and picked like the top 100 or 200 players in the industry, turned on the program and listened for how they interacted with the content. So we listened for, well, did they care about impulse, or did they care about compact, or did they care about power consumption and like the green footprint, or did they care about incremental revenue and raising the ticket value of the overall purchase or basket of goods, if you will. So we started that, and in the course of 3 months, we had cut it from 9 sub verticals to 5 to 3, and eventually to 1, where we found convenience stores was where it was going to play the best. And we did that by listening to how the market was responding to the messaging and really honing in and then doubling down on that. And then even in the last year, it really came to fruition with a couple of major brands signing on with it. So that was a case of how we really didn't know where it applied. We just knew that we had a competitive differentiator that didn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah.
And we needed to try to find somewhere where it really resonated the most and use the demand gen engine to really figure that out very quickly to marshal the resources in the right direction.
Okay, interesting. So I am actually going to go back to the other story about the 96 accounts, and I am going to describe something from my experience. And obviously, when we talk about the marketing community is obviously going to be very focused on marketing. If I talk to my sales community is going to be very focused to sales, just because that's what they are good at. I mean, there is always going to be this conflict and divide between sales and marketing. So, but in my mind, the way I like to think about the responsibility of sales and marketing and which approach is going to be better fit in any scenario. Let's say if I have my 96 accounts, okay, then I would rather be making the experience slightly tailored as opposed to doing the broadcasting, because marketing in my mind is one to end. Sales is very one-to-one personal experience. So when you have such a limited target base, I would rather be providing the personal touch because it's easier to target, it's easier to customize, it's probably going to be less expensive than trying to figure out SEO, AdWords, trying to market. So why do you think whatever marketing based demand gen that you did for this specific story, why that was a right fit as opposed to literally either picking the call or doing the site visits? That is probably the best sales, in my opinion. When you meet in person, you can't replace that with marketing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would never suggest that you should replace a site visit with marketing.
Yeah.
But taking it to the one-to-one, I mean, in this particular program, we tiered the accounts into 3 tiers, and there were I think there were 16, if my memory serves, in the top tier.
Okay.
And but there were something like I believe it was 96 overall.
Yeah.
And going down to that one-to-one, I think actually what you're finding in demand gen, kind of the current state of demand gen, is it is very much blurred and the the lines in the sand between sales and marketing are very blurred today.
Yeah.
You have a lot of organizations where the BDR or sales development function actually lives in marketing and not in sales. And you have a lot of this really tight need for alignment. And I think the need was always there. But the biggest thing with today's what's available in today's marketing is with the analytics that you get on the back of it. You're not measuring, well, how many people saw my ad or how many people visited my website. I mean, those are things that you can measure. But
Yeah.
you're trying to measure how much revenue did I get for the program that I ran.
Yeah.
And you can't, there's no hiding. You either got the revenue or you didn't get the revenue. And in that world, you better make sure that your marketing and your sales care about the same things. Because if they don't, your marketing is going to be firing off all the stuff that sales doesn't want. And so there's definitely a lot of important reasons why you want that tight alignment. And it starts all the way back at, do we have the right 96 accounts?
Yeah.
Do we have the right roles of those accounts? Are we
Yeah.
saying the right things to those people in that account? And why? And how do we know that? And then continuously talking about that. In the case of this program, we actually did go one-to-one. We built the ads one-to-one for each account. So we used language specific to the account in the advertising that we ran. And then we built the marketing automation, like you would expect with marketing automation, to be tailored for those accounts with some personalization on the marketing automation system. But ultimately, also one of the key pieces of content that we built was a ROI calculator. But the ROI calculator was tailored for each. It was interactive and it was tailored slightly for each account. So when you hit that page, you came off the back of an ad that was talking about your company. You landed on a page that was relevant to your company, and then you had an ROI calculator that would help you build the story for what your company did. So it was very tailored for that, and we did it off the back of some tech that helped us automate that. So it wasn't as manual as it might sound. And so in the process of building that, I would say the most critical thing from a sales and marketing alignment perspective was on the front end of really being clear on who should we be targeting.
Yeah.
And then we were very good about having regular check-ins with sales to understand, like, here's who's engaging, here's what we're seeing, what is this, are these still the right people, should we move these from this tier to that tier. So there was always a ongoing feedback loop between the primary sales leader to really make sure we were honed in, and to make sure that the sales team understood what was in market, how people were interacting with it, who was engaging, so that they could prioritize their time on the back of it.
Okay, so let's talk some more about these 96 accounts. So were these large global companies or these smaller companies? Because when you talk about the larger global companies, the way they make decisions, it could be completely different, because they could have, let's say, I don't know, maybe 500 different independent sites. They might be making those decisions independently. So even though you are talking about 96 accounts, but you are actually talking about 96 times 500, because those decisions are really made independently at each of those sites. So talk about how big were these accounts? How was the decision making process? Because in that case, marketing is going to be far more relevant, because now you have a volume. You are not really going after 96 presidents. If that is the case, then probably you can probably do the site visit, you can do the phone calls. But in this particular case, I'm pretty sure you are not simply going to sell one equipment and that's it, you are done. You are probably trying to sell thousands or millions of equipment. Otherwise, I don't know why you are manufacturing this. If you're
the part we were trying to get design wins, so we'd get spec'd into the product, and then for the life of that product, they would be buying our component basically that would go into it. So it could be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar design win. And so in that case, like to your point also about multiple people, so you start getting into the buying group and even thinking about, like for example, we ran different ads and different messaging to the purchasing department than what we ran to the R&D engineers, because we knew that the R&D engineer was eventually going to have to go through purchasing to get this component purchased. I mean, because we were selling millions of them into the account, and so we knew that the purchasing agents cared about different stuff than the R&D engineers, you might would imagine. So there was definitely some consideration for what what content do we want them to see, what ads do we want them to see, when do we want them to see them, and things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as the accounts themselves, there's definitely a spread. I mean, there were some really, really large ones, like common household names that provide fiber to the home,
Yeah.
very, very large businesses, the largest of them. And then there were some smaller ones as well that, might be in the low 100 million type range. But I would say that it was probably 30 or 40% APAC, maybe slightly heavier weighted APAC, and then the rest North America. A lot of these guys had presence. Well, there was a fair amount in Europe too, probably 20% in Europe. But a lot of them had presence in North America, but their actual like main office was in Asia or sometimes in Europe. And even in that context, we may have closed a win in a particular region, and we still wanted to get another region anyway. So that's a separate talk track. But yeah, the spectrum of size of account definitely mattered. And I don't know why this pops to mind, but I think something relevant to throw in here is part of the challenge with category creation, which is what we were doing here, is somebody can't just Google this.
Yeah.
You can't. There's nobody with this problem Googling how do I solve this problem. Like there's nobody researching how to solve this problem because they don't know that it's solvable or that they have it in this particular case. And so part of our challenge was understanding how to talk about that problem that we knew they had that maybe they didn't know they had, and then putting that message in front of them proactively so that they're like, oh, I didn't even know this was possible.
Yeah.
And then kind of doubling down on that. And so that was definitely a big part of what we were trying to do with the account-based approach, whether it was a large company or not. But at the end of the day, we were trying to get site visits. We were trying to get meetings booked.
Yeah.
A common outcome that we were trying to get was either meetings booked at a trade show for the sales team, meeting or webinar attendees registered into we did a lot of like educational, because we're targeting design engineers who need to learn how this worked. So we're trying to get people into webinars, or we're trying to get basically air cover or support for sales folks that were trying to penetrate an account. And so that was what we were primarily focused on doing. So for example, we saw 121% lift in trade show appointments off the back of this, where we had a series of events around the world we would go to that were big in the space, and we would aim our marketing at getting people to book appointments with our team while they were there. So that was like an example of how that would play out.
Okay, very interesting. So let's talk about the category creation a little bit more. So obviously the category is going to be important more from the awareness perspective, searchability perspective. But when you are dealing with procurement, the category is also going to be slightly more political. And I will give you an example of a story from my personal experience. I don't know if you're familiar with the person called Kara Golden. She's the founder of Porter. She actually went through the similar problem. Even though she had all the data that consumers actually wanted her order, when she actually dealt with these procurement departments, they said that, we don't really have any category for your unsweetened water. They didn't have any category for that. And she mentioned that, everybody wants this water, you have to keep it. And the procurement responded, if you don't have category, then maybe nobody wants it. Okay, so it was a political battle. So in your case, did you have to deal with the similar problems when you were working with the procurement? And what kind of messaging did you apply to get their attention? Because again, getting attention from procurement is not easy.
Well, one of the things we knew we wanted to do right out the gate was make sure that when our product hit procurement, it wasn't the first time that person had seen our brand.
Okay.
We were really focused on coming off like we were a large presence and that we were a known entity. Okay. And so one of our focuses was on making sure that our brand was just in front of them. And I'm serious, we would run ads that was just our logo in front of certain audiences, all like just so that our logo would be wherever they were on the internet. And it was a very low cost from a cost per impression perspective thing. And it was something with the right tech you can measure very closely, like how many people at which accounts are seeing it, how often. And we were trying to just raise the likelihood that they had seen our brand before anything else. And then we would also reinforce quality certifications. We would reinforce, in this case, Made in America, because it mattered to us in this case. We would reinforce key messaging like we had never had a product recall and stuff like that. So we'd reinforce key quality messaging, key messages that we just when somebody saw our brand, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be the like on like in a from the R&D engineer. It hopefully would not be the first time they'd seen it, and there would be something that would resonate in their mind as it related to our brand, and that's what we put a lot of our time into from a purchasing perspective. In that case, that was one thing we were really focused on was just getting over that hurdle and being present. So that was something that we were doing a lot for that program, but also trying to understand and make sure that the value prop was compelling enough. In this particular case, there was a significant cost savings, which is probably very helpful when you're dealing with purchasing,
Yeah.
some procurement, because cost is a big driver for them. So we had that advantage with this particular product, so that made it helpful. But that's what we were doing in that particular case.
Okay, amazing. So can you provide some, obviously, I like this example where you are promoting just the brand because, if you have seen this somewhere, then you are actually going to be connecting with the brand, which is compelling. But obviously, you have to monitor your dollars because obviously you are not hoping for any sort of ROI. So let's say if we are doing any sort of campaign, and I don't know how much you spend, do you want to talk a little bit about dollars? How much was your
Yeah.
monthly spend or maybe, quarterly spend that you were hoping for just to get in front of them?
Yeah, so this is obviously a bit complicated of a question, but the easiest way to think about it with what we were doing in this particular case,
Yeah.
we were running programmatic display, which type of advertising to these accounts. It's primarily cookie based, so we knew who it was being delivered to. In this case, we were using a type of technology from a vendor called Terminus, but there
Okay.
are others in the space.
Yeah.
And so it allows you to put the ads in front of specific people at specific accounts. Well, specific job titles at specific accounts, to be very clear. And in that case, if you subtract the technology cost from it, that's like your fixed cost that you're applying across all the programs you're running.
Yeah.
Then you're looking at a cost per thousand impressions model in this case.
Yeah.
And our cost per thousand impressions, generally speaking, is somewhere in the $10 range. The reason why this is particularly interesting in this scenario is because traditional digital advertising, like Google or even on that TradePub example, you're delivering thousands and thousands and thousands of impressions for
Yeah.
whatever your CPM is, but you don't know who you're delivering them to. You try to tweak it based on it's this publication or these keywords, but you don't know for sure who's seeing it. And with account based, it's this role of this account. Even in this geography, you can get down to specific geography as well. So when you're doing that, you don't need millions and millions of impressions. You can sort out how many impressions you want for whatever role type at whatever account at whatever location. And we were dialing in this particular program, if my memory serves, we were dialing in between 6 and 10,000 impressions per account.
Okay.
But at $10 per thousand impressions, you're not talking about significant amounts of money. So we would usually run them in 90-day flights, and we would usually run in the neighborhood of a $10 CPM. So larger accounts need more ads, smaller accounts need fewer ads, and things like that. But the incremental cost for each program from an advertising perspective was definitely not the main driver of cost. The main driver of cost was in the content creation, like
Yeah.
that ROI calculator or the white paper or the infographic or whatever it is that you're actually going to put in front of them.
Yeah.
Typically, that was the most expensive component of the program once we were up and running. For this program in particular, because the ads really weren't driving the cost for the most part.
Okay, very interesting. So, so describe to me, and I'm actually trying to connect the dots. So, obviously, you had roughly 96 accounts, but then you had roughly 6 to 10K impressions. So, how are you basically targeting them? Obviously, you had a bunch of content that you must be using, but how often did you target them? Was it like every hour that you are going to be seeing my white paper? How
Oh, yeah.
how did you actually set the cadence to make sure you are not coming across as spam, but at the same time you are still trying to stay on top of their mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there was advertising, there was email, and there was in some cases outbound contact from like a BDR, which could be email or phone or something like that. In this particular campaign, we didn't do a lot of phone, mainly because it was a lot of APAC. We did do some phone. A lot of it was email and advertising, and a lot of it was in the context of webinars or events. Just to be clear. Also, there were content offers, if you will, blogs and stuff like that as well. So it depended a little bit on what we were running, but typically we would run two types at one time. We run campaign content and editorial content. Editorial being like a blog or if we got this award or whatever it was. And what we were trying to do, we learned this over time. We weren't doing this initially. What we were trying to do is rotate the messaging every 3 weeks. So we wouldn't run the same message for more than 3 weeks. We would potentially rotate back to a message, sometime later, but we would try to rotate a message, even if it was just a different angle on the message every 3 weeks. And so, but it could be the same core like webinar content, but maybe a slightly different angle on it.
Yeah.
So we would rotate it every 3 weeks. And so you would need ads created for that. But typically those ads are costing us something in the neighborhood of somewhere between $75 and $300 a set, depending on what we were doing. If my memory serves, and we had a freelancer building them for us. So there were ads that had to get created. But as far as how often they see it, I mean that kind of comes a little bit down to your preference and the optimization. But there's something in this space called frequency capping. So you definitely are capping how often somebody is seeing it, and you can cap it down to the session, the day, and overall how many times they would see it. And so there's definitely frequency capping going on, but that's where you're getting kind of into the weeds of optimization for the program. Different programs run a little bit differently, but there's definitely some frequency capping going on. As far as like you don't want like them to see 1,000 times in the same day. I think if my memory serves, it's something like 20 times in the same day that they might see it. But that could be on Forbes or ESPN or in their email or whatever, so something like that.
Yeah.
So that's roughly, we usually run 90-day flights. Usually we'd rotate every 3 weeks. Usually there would be frequency capping on a daily basis. And usually we were running two types of content at any given time, editorial and campaign, where a campaign would be like a white paper or an ebook or infographic or something like, or it could be a video or something like that we're running. So that's typically how we were doing it. So as they see the ads, and this is even how we're doing it today, as they see their ads and they're seeing the ads, and based on what they're clicking on with the ads, which messaging has a higher efficacy, then you can tailor, well, I should retarget with this or run emails with that or move this direction or that direction. So typically we would wait until, and we still do this today, a certain number of times that we know they'd seen the ads before engaging in other channels like email. And then that email would tie back to which ads we knew they performed better.
Okay, amazing. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
Yeah, I think the main message that I would convey is that the technology that's available today and the approach that's available today, it's not as cost prohibitive as you would think. And particularly thinking about it from a lean perspective, the technology has made so much leaps forward that you can be really targeted with what you're doing and how you're doing it and what you're saying. You can learn really quickly. And it has evolved quite a bit, and even in the last 5 years, where you can cut a lot of waste out of your marketing with just thinking about it slightly differently now that these tools exist, and really honing in on who should I be talking to and what should I be saying and when and where should I be doing it. And if you can nail that, you can save yourself not only a ton of money, but also you can move a lot faster. And the tech and the process exists today to help you do that, commonly referred to as account-based marketing.
Okay, amazing. Love it. And I really enjoyed this episode. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be, obviously, the technology has come a long way. The more you are going to utilize it, the more you can benefit and you can break into the markets that probably don't even exist at this point of time. You might not have category, but you can still target them. So on that note, I really want to thank you for your time. This was a fascinating episode.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Daniel or his agency, head over to Khronos.agency. It's KHRONOS.AGENCY, or follow him on LinkedIn to catch the latest content in the field of ABM. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Dave Meyer from Busy Web, who describes how marketing automation works and why that is important to understand customer journeys. Also, the interview with Jeff White, who discusses why it is so important to identify the ideal customer profile for your offerings to streamline your growth. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.